It's a great day to be a Buffalo sports fan right now. Tom Brady retired. The Sabres are in a heated playoff race in the Eastern Conference, and the Bills have questions to answer this offseason. Stay tuned to Buffalo Live because it starts right now. Has retired, including me. I honestly thought he was going to retire last summer, but we all know that he retired and then 40 days later decided to come back out of retirement. The funny thing is, he told his wife that 45 was the golden age for him to retire, and he never did. And we all know what that cost him down the line early during the season, right? But another thing is that he decided to come back for one more go around for his 23rd season in the NFL, for age 45, the first one to do it, and it ends up to be his worst season ever since 2019, because we're going to look at the numbers in a second. This was his first losing season as a quarterback in the NFL in 23 years. So in 22 years before this season, he hadn't had a losing season once. That is impossible to do. I mean, it's going to be impossible for any other quarterback to go 22 seasons without a losing season, right? I mean, you look at Mike Tomlin right now, who is maybe one of the greatest coaches right now in the entire National Football League. He's, I think it's like 8 or 9 straight seasons with a winning record. I think he snapped that this season. I got to go back and look at the Pittsburgh Steelers record from this season. I believe this was his first losing season in I feel like a decade, because it's been a while since Mike Tomlin had a losing season as the Steelers head coach. But back to Tom Brady. You look at his numbers from this season. He was a 66% completion percentage this season, which was a percentage down from last year. Obviously, it doesn't say he was regressing, but he just didn't look like his same quarterback. He wasn't completing the same amount of passes that he did the year before. Some of the easy passes look like some of his hardest passes, and some of the hardest passes look like some of his easy passes. He was very inconsistent he looked like an aged quarterback this year. You continue to look at some of his other numbers, like his total passing yards this year, 4,694 total passing yards, 622 yards less from the year before, right? He was also only throwing touchdowns 3.4% of the time on some of his obviously this is, I don't think it's out of 100%. So 3.4% of his throws went for a touchdown. That was worst since 2019. That was his worst touchdown to throw percentage. Touchdown throw percentage. That was his worst since 2019. 2019. I think he won the Super Bowl that year. Yeah, he won the Super Bowl that year against the yes, it was. It was the 2019 Super Bowl against the Los Angeles Rams, where they won 13-10. You talk about that. That's his worst. Was his worst season since 2019. There was a definite decline here from 2021 season to the 2022 season, and it shows in his numbers, and it showed in his play. He looked like a slow quarterback. He looked like a finished quarterback. He just wasn't the same old Tom Brady. Like I said earlier, some of the easy throws look like some of his hardest throws, and some of his hardest throws look like some of his easiest throws. I don't think if I was Tom Brady, I wouldn't have thought of playing a 23rd season, because I think there's way more importance than football, and we obviously saw that during the season, that obviously personal business is personal business, but we seen he got divorced during the season. Maybe that also mentally drained on him. Maybe knowing that, dang, I should have hung it up last year, He also has a new movie out. I mean, he could have, he definitely could have done something with that during the season. So I think after this season, or during the season, he figured out that, yeah, maybe playing football this season wasn't the greatest thing. Obviously, there was speculation that he could have went to the 49ers. He could have went to the Raiders. I think he thought about the 49ers going back home and playing there, and then going to play again in Las Vegas. There's the Josh McDaniels connection. I don't think he wanted to go back to the Bill Belichick tree, but I don't think he was ready to play a 24th season in the NFL. I think he sincerely wanted to retire. Maybe 40, again, maybe 45 was the golden age, and he knew that at the age of 45, a football player can't play this game, and I think he knew that, and I think he sincerely did. We did. I thought it was last year. It wasn't. But now the thing is, what does Tom Brady leave behind, right? What does he leave behind? We saw, I think his name was Tom Luan, or somebody Luan from the Phillip, I think was a former Eagle, or is a Eagle right now. He thought, he posted on Twitter, or wherever, that number 12 of Tom Brady should have been retired throughout the entire National Football League next year. I'm going to contradict that. I don't think it should be. Because obviously I'm a Bills fan. Maybe this comes off as bias, but I don't think it does. To me, his legacy has been tarnished by, I think it was Watergate. No, sorry, it was Spygate. His legacy has been tarnished by Spygate, and his legacy has been tarnished by Deflategate. Both of those sequences where he was either a part of cheating or a part of a cheating team. Maybe it wasn't him fully, but he was a part of that cheating scandal because he was a part of that team. So, I think you look back at his legacy, the legacy here is tarnished by his actions of cheating. But overall, Tom Brady's legacy is that he was one of the greatest quarterbacks to play this game, and no one's ever going to touch it. Something like Babe Ruth, right? Babe Ruth, none of his records have been touched. Same thing with Wayne Gretzky. Right now, most of his records haven't been touched. If you look at Alexander Ovechkin, he's about halfway there in hockey. But you look at Tom Brady. He broke Drew Brees' record. He broke Phillip, Peyton Manning's touchdown records and passing yards records. I don't think any of those records within the next few years, within the next 10, 20, 25, 35, 45 years from now, none of these records are going to be touched. Because he's going to be the only one who's the only one who's going to have them. Maybe 55, 70 years from now, maybe someone will touch them. Maybe. Not guaranteeing it. But overall, to me, where Tom Brady, even though he leaves as one of the greatest, he leaves also a cheater. I mean, you can't retire number 12 for Tom Brady throughout the entire football league if he cheated to get to 2 Super Bowls. But if you're going to make the argument of number 12 should be retired, you also got to make an argument for maybe one of the other greatest quarterbacks to ever play this game, the number 16 of Joe Montana. Joe Montana won 4 Super Bowls in his 4 Super Bowl appearances. He has, I gotta look up his numbers. I thought I wrote them down, but if you compare Joe Montana's numbers to Tom Brady's numbers, they match. That's all you I'm going to say, because looking it up right now, it looks like it's going to take some time. But if you look at Joe Montana's records, here we go, Pro Football Reference. Joe Montana's yards match. If you look at it, this is a horrible segment right now, I'm sorry. But if you look at, I should have had the numbers right next to me, you know? Let's see, here we go, Pro Football Reference. Okay, now we go. Now I can get my point across. Sorry, guys. But you look at quarterback, his record, 117, 47, and 0. 63.2 completion percentage, 40,000 yards, 40,551 yards, 273 touchdowns, 139 interceptions. Okay, what about Tom Brady? Tom Brady, obviously, as this loads, has a 251-82 record, 64.3 completion percentage, and he has 89,000 yards. But you look at the numbers, you're like, okay, well, obviously Tom Brady is way better than Joe Montana. You can make that point for sure. But Tom Brady played 100% way longer than Joe Montana. Joe Montana only played way more than a decade. Maybe Joe Montana played 16 seasons. Tom Brady played 23. So you do the math there. Tom Brady played far more seasons than Joe Montana did. And that was able for Tom Brady to play in maybe 3 or 4 more Super Bowls than Joe Montana. If Joe Montana had maybe played 2, 3, 4 more seasons, maybe he gets another crack at the Super Bowl and gets his 5th Super Bowl. But you look at Tom Brady and what he's done in his Super Bowls don't match to what Joe Montana did in his Super Bowls, right? So I think you have an argument for Joe Montana to be the greatest of all time, and you have a argument for Tom Brady to be the greatest of all time. So that's where I leave that. If you're going to make the argument for Tom Brady to have his numbers retired, I have an argument for Joe Montana for his number to be retired. Moving on. Now, Buffalo is heading into the offseason with $22 million over the cap. That number sounds humongous. It's awful. $22 million over the cap? So what needs to happen, right? What needs to happen? Well, Josh Allen and Von Miller obviously need to restructure their contracts. Both of them take up the majority of the cap. We also save some money if Mitch Morse decides to retire, right? Mitch Morse decides to retire. That means we save some cap. Same thing if we trade Ed Oliver. If we trade Ed Oliver, we save, oh my goodness, $10 million in cap space. So we decided to trade Ed Oliver right now at this minute. Here we go. We get $10 million worth of cap space. So that means if we decide to trade Ed Oliver right now, or in March, or in April, instead of $22 million over the cap, that means we'll be only $12 million over the cap. Well, then if we restructure Josh Allen's contract, that means we will have significantly more money than what if we just restructured Allen's and Miller's contracts alone. So if we trade Ed Oliver, restructure both Allen's and Miller's contract, that puts the door open to solve some of the offensive line issues that we had this season, right? To protect Josh Allen so he's not getting pressured on 50% or more of his throws. And that then, if you give Josh Allen time to throw the football, that means you're giving time for a guy like Gabe Davis or Stephon Diggs or even Khalil Shakir to get open, right? If Josh Allen's always rushed in the pocket because 50% of his throws are under pressure, even though he was the best quarterback this season in completion percentage in under pressure, that doesn't mean you don't fix your offensive line. Because my goodness, Josh Allen was a punching bag last year for defensive linemen. You saw at the end of the year, his elbows were literally bleeding. Like a simple little patch over his elbow wasn't going to fix the substantial amount of cuts and bruises on his elbows. he was a pretty beat up person at the end of the year this season. So I think that's the thing, right? You needed to fix your offensive line, but in order to fix all your offensive line, you need cap space, right? There's probably some insurance pieces out there that the Bills can go get big money for them, but I think the Bills are going to stay the veteran route on offensive line and try to get a couple decent veterans that can really hold the offensive line. Maybe a guy like Jason Kelce. You're like, man, I'm really jumping into the pool. I mean, yeah, he's probably on the expensive end, guys. I know. But if you feel like Mitch Morse is going to retire, you trade Ed Oliver, you probably have some money to get a guy like a 36-year-old or going to be 36-year-old Jason Kelce. You could pay him for 2 seasons. Then if he decides to walk away after 2 seasons, fine. Or you can sign him for 1 year and then he decides to walk away after 1, fine. Either way, just get some help for Josh Allen. You can also get that in the draft, right? Definitely. You could definitely get Osiris Torrance. I mean, depending the way the draft goes, you could probably get a guy like Osiris Torrance. There's a really good guy out of Tennessee. I forget his name. Darnell Wright. Darnell Wright is a viable option for the Bills in the draft this season. So I think there's ways the Bills can help Josh Allen in the draft and in the free agent market. Guy like Paris Campbell has been thrown around for the Buffalo Bills this offseason. Guy like him, cheaper guy that can go out, catch the football. I mean, he's a possession receiver. Great. The Bills need someone like that they can rely on to catch the football and get yards after the catch. I mean, because there was the case of the drops this season with Gabe Davis, and it was utterly horrible and just agonizing in general. But back to Ed Oliver, right? You might think, okay, why are we talking so much about Ed Oliver when we can trade somebody else? Well, 1, Ed Oliver gets us tons of cap space. 2, he's still in an area where you can trade. He's still young enough where you can trade him for somebody else and get a 2nd round pick. I don't know. I mean, I've been fooling around with Pro Football Focus's mock draft, and a guy that's also been spewing interest among Bills fans is a guy called Hunter Renfrow. Yeah, he might be on the older end of things, and maybe in 2 years will cost the Bills some money if we decide to re-sign him in 2 years. But hey, that means we get Hunter Renfrow for 2 years, and who wouldn't want Hunter Renfrow for 2 years? Honestly, I would take Hunter Renfrow for 2 years, and if he decides to go, thanks for coming. But if we decide to resign him, thanks to Lord, we can resign him. But that is if we have enough cap space. In order to get some cap space here, the Bills are going to have to trade somebody, right? If we're going to try to gain some cap space here, 1 or 2 guys is going to have to go, and I think Ed Oliver is going to be on the go. I think he is. If he's going to free up $10 million in cap space, if I'm Brandon Beane, I'm looking at that, I'm like, okay, yes, trading Ed Oliver, a guy that we thought was going to, I guess, improve this defensive line, who hasn't shown that in about 4 seasons, yet we can free up $4 million in cap space, yet get a 2nd round pick, and yet maybe get a player. For sure I will take it. If I'm Brandon Beane, I know a guy shooting for the stars and get a guy like Hunter Renfrow, yeah, you probably don't want to, but hey, who wouldn't want a Hunter Renfrow to help Josh Allen with his, just get weapons around Josh Allen, right? Because what are the chances of a Jackson Smith-Njigba being at 27, right? I mean, you look at all these mock drafts, there's a chance that all of the top flight receivers are taken within the top 20. or within the top 25, and the Bills just fall short of that. The Bills are in the top 30. So the Bills are going to have to trade up. In order for the Bills to trade up, they're going to have to give up somebody. Or they trade their first round pick, Ed Oliver, get a player, and it's somebody else's pick. Or trade their pick. Here's the thing. I think I traded one. I think in a mock draft that I did, I traded Ed Oliver, my first, and got Hunter Renfrow and the Raiders' second round pick, and it worked. They were interested, I was interested, and it worked. Both parties got involved. I didn't have to give up a lot. Maybe to you, you're thinking right now, yeah, Ed Oliver and in our first round pick is a lot. But if you look at it, Hunter Renfrow is like drafting like a Jordan Addison, but a prime Jordan Addison, and you don't have to wait 2 to 4 years for him to spark up and give us something, right? So I think doing that definitely helps the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen give him some weapons. So what are some prime positions for the Bills to target? If I'm the GM, obviously O-line and wide receiver are your two top priorities at this moment. Some fans might say the offensive line is more important than the wide receiver position. Some might say the wide receiver position is more important than the offensive line. In my head, both are equally important, and if you can get both done at the same time, that would make life easier. But you're probably going to have to work on one more than the other, and the Bills have just shown they haven't been able to get a steady offensive line for Josh Allen. So if you're the Bills right now, grabbing a couple good linemen in free agency will help. But again, if you're up against the cap, someone has to go. So a guy like maybe a Spencer Brown is going to have to go. You can maybe grab a first round pick for Spencer Brown, then dish your first round pick away, and at Oliver, get a guy like a Hunter Renfrow. So you get a solid O-line. You get a solid O-lineman, one solid O-lineman, and a solid receiver. Hey, that might improve your team. But again, you just can't just do one. You might have to choose one or the other. And if I'm the Bills and I have to choose one or the other, I'm probably picking offensive line. Because if you get the offensive line, Josh Allen has time. Diggs and Davis and Shakir all have time to get open on their own. So if I'm the Bills, those are your two prime positions I would be looking for. Another thing is safety. There's a couple good. There's some really good safeties on the market for some low prices. 30-year-old Eric Rowe, he's out there for about $3 million. And if you really think the Bills can handle this cap, get a guy like Avon Bell and take it on him under contract for a few seasons for about $9 million. I think his cap range is. And then Trey Edmonds. Next episode we'll talk a little bit more of Trey Edmonds and Jordan Poyer. This came over the weekend. What their value is in the open market. We'll definitely hit on that next episode. But right now, we're going to have to talk some Sabres, right? They're 1 point out of the playoff spot. They play Calgary on Saturday afternoon, but dang, we're going to have to wait another week for this to happen. By Saturday, my goodness, we could definitely be 5 points out of a playoff spot if Pittsburgh wins both of their games. Pittsburgh plays tonight, 7 o'clock versus Colorado, and then Friday night, 10 o'clock against the Anaheim Ducks. So if they win both of those games, the Sabres will sit 5 points out of a spot instead of 1. So the middle and end of February is important for the Sabres. And then they have some thinking to do before, I think, the March 3rd trade deadline. If the Sabres are about 8 or more points out of a playoff spot, I don't think the Sabres do much at the deadline. At that point, I think the Sabres, as they head into March, know that they're still within a good amount of points where they can still catch up and get in, but they're just not going to go all in because they're not 100% there. You know what I mean? They're not sitting 3 points out of a playoff spot, and they just need that one player, plug him in, and then we're in. I think 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 14 points out of a playoff spot. The Sabres sit back at the trade deadline, maybe pick up 2, 3 depth pieces if they still think they're in contention. At that point, 8 to 15 points out of a playoff spot. I think the Sabres let their young guys play and hope for next season. Hey, I mean, you could still get to the playoffs 18 to 15 points out and still in the month of March. But again, that's still a very long haul out of a playoff spot. If we're 2 to 3 points out of a playoff spot on March the 3rd, I think the Sabres get a guy like a Boone Jenner. A fourth line center. He can also play wing. You could plug him in at fourth line center. He's a physical guy. He will hit on every play, and he's a really good guy that he could fit in. There's another guy on Columbus that the Sabres can definitely get, again, for a cheaper price. You can get him for a third or fourth round pick if the Sabres are wanting to. You maybe have to give up a low end prospect, fine. If the Sabres are going to go after a guy like a Patrick, just for a quick example, Patrick Kane, and you're going to have to give up a couple of top-end prospects, no, the Sabres are not going to do that. The Sabres are going to get a guy like a Boone Jenner that you could get for a third or fourth round pick, plug him in, and also you're probably going to have to give up like a top 9 AHL forward, but other than that, the Sabres would do that. So, you got to think, when you're doing trade deadline transactions, it's going to have to be cheap for the Buffalo Sabres. We'll dive in more to Sabres playoff ambitions next episode. Definitely will save some more time for the Buffalo Sabres in the next episode. But thanks as always for listening. Remember, tell people about the show and follow the show on Twitter at Buffalo Live Pod. The link is in the show notes. New content will be uploaded to the YouTube channel weekly, so click on the link and give a sub. With that, I'm your host, Paul Kasperzak, signing off.